Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I've come here to take class on the chapter reproduction. We all know that we are born to this world, but we don't know how we have come to this world. There is a hidden secret from the side of science. In this chapter, we shall learn how we have come to this world. The chapter that we have today is reproduction from chapter number 4. Reproduction, as you know, is a process by which living beings produce copies of themselves. In many simple organisms, reproduction takes place asexually, and in higher organisms, it takes place sexually. So reproduction usually takes place in two different ways: sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Now let us discuss about what is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is that mode of reproduction which always takes place with the help of two individuals, that is a male and a female, whereas asexual reproduction takes place without the help of any other individual. Sexual reproduction in animals, it involves the fission of the male and the female cell to reproduce single cell with the which is called zygote. So this zygote, which is called a single cell, it is formed by the fusion of the male cell and the female cell. So the process of the fusion of the male and the female cell is called fertilization. The male cell is known as male gamete, and the female cell is known as female gamete. So after the fusion of the male and the female cell, what happens is that a single cell called zygote is formed. And the zygote then repeatedly divides and redivides and takes the shape of an individual, and it gets born to a small baby. Now we shall learn about the types of fertilization. As we have learned that this fertilization is the fusion of the male and the female cell. This fertilization is again of two different types: external fertilization and internal fertilization. External fertilization is that fertilization where fertilization takes place outside the body of organisms, and internal fertilization is that fertilization which takes place inside the body of the organism, that is especially in case of the females, inside the female's body. External fertilization, it takes place in those organisms that are considered as lower organisms. Especially we can say about the birds, the crocodiles, the snakes, the lizards, and so on. And internal fertilization, it takes place in higher animals like the lizards, crocodiles, birds, and mammals. Now, you might be thinking, what are these mammals? Mammals are those organisms that grow up feeding on their mother's milk. Like we, the elephants, the dogs, the cats, all these organisms, they grow up feeding on their mother's milk. So they are known as mammals. Now we shall discuss about reproduction in men. Under this topic, we'll come to learn about the male reproductive system as well as the female reproductive system, the fertilization, pregnancy, and childbirth, and many more. So let us start with the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system, it consists of the testes, the urethra, epididymis, scrotum, vas deferens, and the urinary bladder. This testis, it lies in a sac known as scrotal sac. It is located outside the abdominal cavity. They produce sperms in large numbers. The sperms they collect and mature in a tube which is known as epididymis. From there, it travels through the muscular tube called the vas deferens into the urethra. and this urethra, it lies inside the penis. As the sperm, it travels through the vast different secretions from various glands takes place, and the mixture of these secretions and the sperms is known as semen. Then this semen is transferred to the vagina during intercourse or the opening of the female reproductive system by the penis. Now, the female reproductive system, it consists of the ovary, the uterus, the cervix, vagina, fallopian tube, and all. These ovaries of the female reproductive system, it lies in the lower part of the abdominal cavity. They start producing ova when a girl reaches puberty. Puberty is the stage at which a female attains sexual maturity. Usually, either of the ovaries, it produces one ovum every month. Over every ovary, it is a muscular tube which ends in a funnel with a finger-like projections. This tube carries the ovum from the ovary to the uterus or the womb and is called the fallopian tube, or we can also call oviduct. The uterus is a muscular organ. Its lower portion is called the cervix and is connected to the vagina, which opens to the outside. Then the ovaries are attached to the uterus by the ligaments. Now, the fertilization. We have already learned about fertilization. The process of the fusion of the male and the female cell is called fertilization. So, during fertilization, what happens is that the male and the female cell, they meet up together through a process, and that process is called fertilization. So, to undergo this fertilization process, the sperms are introduced into the vagina during intercourse, and it travels up to the vagina, and from the vagina to the uterus, and lastly to the fallopian tube. There, one of the sperm, it fuses with the ovum or the fertilization that takes place. The zygote then forms and it divides repeatedly and travels to the uterus. It gets attached to the walls of the uterus and forms the embryo. This uterus we can also call as the mother's womb. Okay, it is the place where the zygote gets attached and it forms to an embryo which we can call as a tiny baby. The cells of the embryo then later on it gets divided repeatedly and it gets differentiated into many different types to form different tissues. The tissues slowly and slowly it forms organs, and the embryo slowly it takes the familiar form of a baby. This is what we call as a fetus. The fetus which grows under the uterus or on the uterus of the female's body, it has got rich supply of blood vessels from which the growing embryo draws nutrition. So these nutrients and the oxygen, it passes into the embryo through a structure called the placenta. This placenta, it carries waste materials from the embryo into the mother's blood and is connected to the embryo by the umbilical cord. The baby slowly and slowly it grows in the mother's uterus for about 9 months. And this period is called pregnancy. Inside the uterus, it is protected by a sac called uterus. Inside the uterus, it is protected by a sac called amniotic sac. This sac, it contains amniotic fluid. At the time when the baby is inside the uterus, this amniotic sac, which is filled with the amniotic fluid, it provides a cushion to the baby. When the baby is ready to be born, the sac, it bursts and the walls of the uterine, it goes through contractions to push the baby out through the vagina. Then I shall discuss about the twins. We know that twins are not born every time. Especially in some cases, we find that twins are born in some families. So how these twins are born? Let us learn it. Only one ovum is produced at a time, we all know. But sometimes, however, two ova happens to mature and are released at the same time. They are fertilized by two sperms, which results in the birth of twins. Twins born in this way, they are called fraternal or non-identical twins. It can also happen that sometimes the fertilized egg, it divides into two and leads to the formation of the birth of identical twins. These identical twins, they look almost like copies of themselves, and they are of the same sex. That means if a boy is born, then it will be, if a male boy is born, then both the twins will be male, and if a female is female girl is born, then both the babies will be female, and they are quite identical. They look almost like copies of themselves. Identical twins are also known as fraternal twins. They are as similar as any other siblings and need not be of the same sex. Nextly, I shall discuss about the menstrual cycle. This menstrual cycle is specially related to females. It is only related to the females. We know that when a girl reaches puberty, it is the stage at which a girl attains sexual maturity. At this stage, either of the ovaries, it releases an ovum into the fallopian tube once in every 28 days. This is called ovulation. The production of ovum once in every 28 days is the process is known as ovulation. When this happens, the uterus it starts preparing to receive and nourish the embryo. Its walls get thickened with an increased supply of blood. And if the ovum does not get fertilized, it is expelled out through the vagina, and together with it is expelled the lining of the uterus and blood. And this process is called menstruation. So the entire process of ovulation, thickening of the uterine wall, and menstruation is called menstrual cycle, and this usually a 20-day cycle, which is always found in case of females only. Now we shall discuss about secondary sexual characters. These secondary sexual characters are certain types of changes in the characteristics of the males and the females, which we find many physical and emotional changes occurs in boys and girls around the age when they attain the puberty. Especially after they attain the puberty stage, they have many physical and emotional changes. This period of life is referred to as adolescence period and is associated with a great deal of physical and mental growth. That means we have changes in our body physically as well as mentally. Generally, if you talk about the girls, they attain puberty between 11 and 14 years, and the boys between 13 and 16 years. Puberty is marked by the onset of menstruation in girls, and for the boys, by the production of sperms. It is also associated with several external physical changes known as secondary sexual characters. These changes are like the growth of beards, growth of hairs inside the armpits, in pubic region, especially in case of the boys. And if you talk about the girls they have enlargement of the breasts. They also have got growth of hairs in the armpits, in the pubic region, and the enlargement of pelvic girdle. So these are some of the secondary sexual characters in case of the boys and the girls. Now we shall discuss about some different glands. We all know this endocrine system. This endocrine system, it consists of several glands. It is scattered all over our body. These glands togetherly they form the endocrine glands, or we call it an endocrine system. They are different from one another. They discharge certain types of chemicals, and these chemicals which are produced directly into the blood, unlike other glands, they are known as hormones. Now these hormones which are secreted by the endocrine glands directly into the blood, these hormones they act like chemical messengers, and they are carried by the blood to specific organs or tissues with messages for them to function in particular ways. Thus the endocrine system, it helps in controlling and coordinating the functions of many organs of the body. Some of the endocrine glands which are located in our body, especially we can say the pituitary, the thyroid, but parathyroid, adrenal glands, pancreas, testes, and ovaries. Okay, they are meant for performing different functions, and they are located at different locations. You can refer the table 4.1 and to get a help from it. The testes, as we know, is a reproductive organ. It produces the male sex hormone, which we call as testosterone. This hormone, it causes the development of the secondary sexual characters in case of the males. Whereas in case of the females, we find the estrogen, which is responsible for the development of secondary sexual characters. Along with estrogen, the females at the stage of pregnancy, they also produce another hormone that is known as progesterone. It also helps in bringing about many changes in the body during pregnancy. Now, we have got another topic, that is gender and sex. If we talk about gender, we all know that this, at the time during, if any person asks what is his gender, we used to indicate it as male or female. So the word sex and the gender are sometimes used interchangeably. That means sometimes in case of the sex, what is the sex of the person, we write it as male or we write it as female. Or sometimes when it is asked for gender, we write it as male or female. So the word sex and gender are used interchangeably. Sex is determined by the nature, while gender is a social or a cultural concept. When we refer to sex, we mean the biological characteristics that makes one male or female. And on the other hand, when we speak about gender, we mean the characteristics people associated with being male or a female. For example, a lady who always does work in the kitchen, who always used to cook food inside the kitchen, who always does the household work. So she has been considered as a female. And the way she dresses, by looking at his dressings, lady can be assumed as a female. But if a lady starts wearing the dresses of males, then the lady will no more be considered as a female. She will be considered as a male. So this gender, by this word gender, we mean the characteristics people associated with being male or a female. That means the way they live their lives. According to the way they live their lives, they were considered as a male or female. Gender roles are the functions that society sees as feminine or masculine. These are certain types of roles that a male or a female performs. These roles are encouraged in children from a very early age. There is no law that binds a girl to behave in a particular way or compels a boy to perform certain functions. However, since most people in society have certain ideas of what is feminine and what is masculine, boys and girls grow up performing these roles. For example, an Indian girl performing these roles, for example, an Indian girl may be encouraged by her parents to learn cooking, while a boy may be automatically help his father mend a fuse or to fix a leaking tap. The ideas of the roles man and woman should perform is often reflected in their choice of profession. For example, women are associated with nurturing, their caring, looking after the old and the young. Thus, quite often, women become nurses, dietitians, counselors, or primary school teachers. Men are again associated with protection, valor, physical stamina, and ability to put up with physical hardships. Thus, young boys often dream to join the army, navy, or air force. Another topic we have under this sex and sex is taboo. This taboo is a social or religious custom which prohibits a certain behavior or practice. For example, widow remarriage system was considered taboo in India until the Widow Remarriage Act was passed in the year 1856. In fact, it was frowned upon after that, and still in many parts of India, the education of women, the inheritance of property by women marrying a person from a different caste, community, religion are some of the taboos which are still believed in some parts of India. The last topic that we have right now is sex determination. You might be thinking, what is sex determination? This sex determination is the way to know the baby, whether the baby to be born is a male or a female. So This sex determination is done by various methods in various hospitals and all, hospitals and clinics. So this sex determination, it is actually a punishable act, which is not at all allowed. Why it is called a punishable? Why it is said a punishable act? Because we know that when the parents come to know that the baby to be born is a female, they often try to kill the baby. So it is also called as a foeticide. When they come to know that the baby to be born is female, they try to kill the foetus. This is called foeticide. Foeticide. To determine the sex, various methods are applied, like the cell can be taken out from the amniotic fluid of the baby, and it can be checked to know whether the baby to be born is a boy or a male, or boy or a female. Now, there is some other methods again, that ultrasonography, or we can also determine the sex of the fetus by testing the mother's urine. Whatever the way used, however, sex determination is prohibited by law and it's always a punishable act. Still, people do not stop themselves. They don't want female child at all. So they often try to determine the sex, and when they are caught, they were punished. Now, sex determination is punishable. Female foeticide is a part of life in many parts of India, and so the female to male ratio in our country has fallen to 933 is to 1000. So with this, I end up my class. Thank you all.